Actually, they did what I thought was the right.
I was pretty surprised.
That's a big conflict. I know.
Welcome to the MLOps Utah meetup. We're so glad you could come.
these slides together last minute, knowing it was a lightning talk, and I really only thinking about this for like 5 minutes for the conversation. But so I could probably give it without the slides, but I think they'll be useful. So right now, yeah, oh, you're fine. So actually, you can go back. Yeah, so I'm Matt Sharp. My title right now is AI engineer, but I think there's talks about changing it to AI strategist, would just give me like my 10th different title in AI everywhere. Data scientist to MLOps engineer to data engineer to et cetera. I've pretty much held every title at different companies. And so my current role, what I'm trying to do is, so I'm working at and they are realizing that the government really wants to invest in AI. And so they're looking for consultants who can do AI work. And so that's why they brought me in to kind of, level up the entire company on how to do AI. And so it's been a very interesting. We're used to working in the government, become like AI first. And so this is what I'm considering AI transformation. And I think if you can go to the next slide now, is everyone is doing this right now. If you just go on LinkedIn for like 2 seconds and just scroll, like every single post is like, hey, AI this, AI that. Hey, I use ChatGPT to do this. I'm using Cursor to help me with this. Some of them are funny around the mishaps of AI screwing up, and others are very informative of like, hey, here's the 3 prompts that I use every day that help me solve these problems. And so like everyone's doing AI. You look at blog posts and videos, conferences, or just vendors selling AI. Everyone wants to be an AI company right now. Go to the next slide. But I think all of this is really missing the mark of what it means to be an AI transformation. So like really when we think of like, what does an AI first company really look like? And even among the big companies, right? Like people don't think of Apple as an AI first company. In fact, most people think Apple is falling behind. Same with like Amazon. And so like really, okay, Facebook, yeah, I mean, we got the llama models out of it. Them, they seem to be doing great. Google seems to be doing great, but like, most of them, it's like, hey, we have new companies that seem to be leading in this way, from OpenAI to Anthropic. And so what does it take for like Apple to become an AI first company? Is it just teaching their engineers how to use ChatGPT a little bit better and be a little bit more proficient? And no, I think that really misses the mark. That's not going to make Apple an AI first company. So in which case, I really feel like most people, most companies in particular, are approaching it like Toys R Us was approaching the digital transformation, where, and where's Toys R Us now, right? Like their whole approach was, hey, let's build a website where people can buy toys online and call it good. But that was the exact antithesis of what they were originally doing, which was we're going to have these stores full of toys that kids could come and play. And, when kids can see the toys and run around, like they're going to go buy, and their parents are going to be compelled to buy more toys than they were necessarily planning on. So like the website really didn't mesh well with their overall strategy. And so this is kind of, we had these digital transformations, which, like I said, I'm helping out with, kind of government consulting now. And like, there's large parts of governments and even like older tech companies that still like use fax machines and aspects of like this. So there are still companies struggling for digital transformation, let alone AI transformation. And so if we kind of think about that from a digital transformation, it literally changed how people work. So you can change the next slide. Yeah, so it's a fundamental change in how we work. Right? Digital transformation fundamentally changed how we worked. We weren't writing on paper. We were actually having databases to store things. We could start moving to big data. We could start making predictions, making recommendations. All of these things came from, a fundamental shift and the underlying data and how we were working with. And so in the same way, I really think AI, if we want to do an AI transformation, it's more than just teaching employees how to use AI chat and search versus like search tools. We really have to kind of dig deeper. Yeah, I think this is my last one. So I'm not 100% sure, and this is the lightning talk aspect of it. And so I'm just kind of posing some of these thoughts that I've been thinking about a lot lately. It just, what we're currently doing isn't leading to necessarily an AI transformation and where we need to go. But at least from my efforts, I'm starting to see some improvements. And one of the things I'm definitely seeing is really to be an AI first company really requires everyone to kind of start thinking like a data scientist, where they start approaching problems as a data scientist was. I was in a meeting with a VP, and we were doing a proof of concept for an AI system, and he started talking about, oh, well, now we can start looking at these metrics, and you're just like, oh, wow, like you're starting to think less like an engineer and more like a data scientist, the more POCs we're doing and the more you start building with AI. And I think that is ultimately what we're going to start seeing more. And, these systems, they're probabilistic, right? And so there's just this aspect where you have to kind of approach things in business as you do in the real world. Almost everything we do in the real world is really probabilistic. There are very few times where you have, hey, this is the cut and dry right answer. And I think we're starting to see that more in business as well, as people who are really taking an AI approach are driven. Anyways, that's my presentation. I told you it'd be quick. Does anyone have any questions?
Yeah, all right, so a couple questions here. So first off, what got you into learning via the fundamental learning?
I've been doing this for over 12 years now, so it took a really long time. What got me interested is just I was and I mean it really was only coined in 2012, right? And so I don't know. So I just think the problem space and being able to answer questions is really what drove me into it.
Come on. It wasn't trying to play StarCraft with reinforcement learning.
Oh, absolutely. Well, that kind of came a little bit later.
I know, that was only 6 years ago.
They're kind of talking about some of my previous projects where I built reinforcement learning agents to play StarCraft. This was right after AlphaGo came out. Hey, we finally beat the world champion in Go. It seemed impossible. And then people were like, well, what's the next hardest thing? It's StarCraft, apparently. And so DeepMind started working on AlphaStar. But before they released their paper, I'm like, I'm going to beat I'm going to beat DeepMind. I don't have any funding. I got a 1080 Ti CPU, which was the best of the time. I'm like, I can do this. And so I went and built my own agent. It did pretty well. It beat some humans, but yeah.
Name of your bot.
So,
What's the name of your bot?
it was called Macro Motor. So the agent, so I had programmed a lot of the micro interactions, and the bot was only designed to really make big macro decisions. So which units to build, when to attack, those types of things. But the actual units would micro themselves.
moral of the story, the best thing to do is find a hobby and then get that to give you skills for your job.
Yeah.
And it was my first talk I ever got for a meetup. I'm so proud of that.
It was a fun, I think it was a fun meetup. It was this one. I brought my computer in and let people play it. Most people destroyed it, but a couple people actually lost.
Would have been me.
All right, you had another question?
Yeah. So I just finished a program for data analytics. And looking at it like in the long, like looking at like the long, at it in the long run. How do you transition? Like, do you know, like how you can make the transition from data analytics into data science, or is there a
Yeah, I've talked about this a lot with people, and I'm happy to go into it in depth as well. But like ultimately, data analytics gets your foot in the door and it helps you start working with data. And you should take every advantage to do that. But ultimately, and this is true for every data position, is being really good at data analytics doesn't necessarily mean you're good at data scientist, even though they're adjacent. Because they're adjacent, you get more of a picture of what their job looks like and what to do it. But it's like how do I say this? Like being a race car driver doesn't make you an airline pilot. Even though you're both driving, you both have high precision skills, right? But like they're different, right? So they might have friends and you might see things, and so you ultimately need to probably do some side projects or take on extra projects that lead you to working extra hours at work. But like, kind of building that skill set, and all of these things always take time, right? Like building a career takes time. And so what I would say as well is no matter where your goal is, enjoy where you are now, right? Because data analytics is really fun. And data science, in my opinion, is really boring. And so you're gonna like a lot of people really want to get into data science because it's the cool title, and then they get in it and they leave really quickly. Lots of people I know who were data scientists are no longer data scientists. So it's just one of those things to learn is like, but like data analytics really is cool. There are lots of people I know who have been data analysts for years and years. So enjoy what you're doing now.
And then and then kind of just added. So you mentioned like how you work on side projects. And then this is coming from someone who doesn't really have a background in math, but from what I understand, data science involves a lot of math. For someone who hasn't been exposed to like a whole lot of math, like schooling and these side projects, how else can you learn math as you go? Like that is the math required to become a data scientist.
I mean, there are courses like online courses that go into the nitty gritty of math. There are books I can think about that talk about the math underlying
No.
Work.
Did it? No. Yeah, I told you 30% of the time. Yeah,
I didn't realize it was like a group. Oh,
it's a Google Meet thing. Did you ever get your password?
Yeah.
So sorry.
I don't have Discord on my work computer because I'm responsible.
Well, where do you want me to send it to?
Kidding, I'm just kidding. I got it on my phone, don't worry.
I put Discord in my browser on my work computer. That's how I'm responsible.
We're done.
So while we're waiting, anybody got any fun side projects? No?
Oh, I was gonna say, might not be really data related, but I'm trying to make a game as my portfolio.
Nice. Yeah, game dev's really popular right now. And I am trying to figure out why, because I have absolutely no interest in it, but all of my coworkers are doing it. And so like I don't know, it's a big deal.
There's actually I found an article on freecodecamp.org that'll show you on how to do it. So I'm kind of I'm gonna follow that.
Good deal.
And I can send you that link too to the freecodecamp.org page.
Just put it in Forge like that'd be great.
You bet. Yeah. Oh.
Just hit the okay. Is it okay on this? Yeah. Thank you, Eric. We're rolling with my punches.
Couldn't copy the link, so I just typed it manually. It worked.
That's a miracle.
All right. Y'all can see, I'm assuming?
Yeah, we're good.
Perfect. Okay, so I'm going to talk about MCP. Does anybody know or not know what MCP is at this point? Like control program. Okay, cool. Let's do a quick overview. So MCP stands for, well, let me pull it up. I lost my slides. Okay, so here's my slide. Okay, MCP, there's my information. I guess more background on me. I'm a software engineer at a company called Bayesian. They're based here in Utah, but in St. George. We also have a Lehigh office. And I'm on a team that, well, more background. Bayesian deals with printers. We make an enterprise printer management solution. Kind of boring, but there's actually a few interesting problems at scale. And
Yes.
I'm going to talk about how I'm trying to solve one of our problems in like development with MCP. And so Mariah posted this MCP template in Go shop, and I decided to give a talk after she asked me nicely to do this. So MCP, what does it stand for? It stands for My Cute Program, right? No, it's actually Model Context Protocol. And so we're actually going to go and we'll look up MCP protocol and Model Context Protocol. Awesome. And look at all this. This is the one we want. Model Context Protocol.io. So this is where you'll find everything you need to know about MCP. But MCP is a really simple idea where we pass LLMs a list of tools that they can use and how to use those tools. Okay. And it seems really daunting when you read through this first. There's hosts, there's clients, there's servers, data sources, remote servers. Basically, you're going to give your LLM a list of tools that it has. Maybe one of them is calculator. Right. And in the calculator tool, there's a schema that says you can, in your JSON, like operator colon plus to like plus two numbers together or whatever, right? And then the LLM will like take your commands and you say, hey LLM, I want to add two numbers together. And then it'll look at its tools and say, oh, I have a tool to add two numbers together. And if I should kind of a rudimentary explanation, but I highly recommend reading up on NCP. It's honestly in its infancies, but I was really glad that Anthropic finally put out something like this, because before I was like writing Lua scripts and like making my own NCP and telling the LLM, I'll kill your grandmother if you format this JSON incorrectly. Right?
It performed better when you threatened it with murder.
It did, yes. But now we have MCP, and like these models are trained on like tool use and formatting JSON properly. So very cool. So I think that MCP is really just a natural language front end or an API, a tool, whatever, right? You expose a number of tools to the LLM that it's able to use. When should you do this, right? When I mentioned MCP is early, the joke, the meme online is the S in MCP stands for security. So there's like, they just came out with some security stuff. There's like OAuth and tokens, but like, it's not prime time ready to like throw into production, really, I would say. But I would say when you use it when security doesn't really matter. Like if you're like on a local machine, local dev is a great use case for this. If you want to share your MCP, like share it in a context where people that also know how to set up MCP servers. Right, like I'm not going to tell my mother or my grandmother, hey, use this MCP server that I wrote to check your emails or whatever, right? And then I think the last little bit here are like kind of tasks that fit well into like MCP interactions, right? So tasks that use like Postman, the request application, right? You've done web development, you send a Postman request, whatever. Tasks that you would use Postman, you can otherwise use an MCP server. And I'm going to show you that exactly. That's kind of what I did. Data entry is a really good one, and like more menial tasks that involve typing and things where no front end, or a front end is like a CLI, and you're talking to somebody that's maybe like got a little bit of computer knowledge but doesn't want to use a CLI, things like that. Where a front end doesn't exist, you can replace it with MCP, which is the natural language front end, right? So I would say a good rule of thumb is if you can say what you want to the LLM faster than opening your browser, use an MCP for that task. If you can say what you want faster than typing out a command on the command line, then for that, right? Okay, everybody following me? That's the end of my slides, but I'm going to show you a demo. So I actually have Peter if we have enough time, if people want to see.
All the time you want.
So I have a lot of windows. Let me just.
That's not post in an emulator, was it?
Oh, this?
Yeah.
This is Gather.
Oh.
If you've not used Gather, you should
I
use
have
Gather.
used Gather.
Gather is amazing.
I used it at a conference, a virtual conference. That's why it looks like Pokemon, because it's a 2D scroller.
My coworkers.
So you can walk.
What's up? Sorry.
So my team at Mation is responsible for a product called Alpha Management. And long story short, people want to print paper. Wow. And so they don't want to manage a print server in on-prem. And so we provide a cloud solution. So basically, you'd send your print job to an endpoint /print. Then we do a bunch of stuff that you want to do to it, like processing or formatting, changing, whatever. And then we beam it back down to your printer and it prints. Sometimes we lose it, sometimes we don't. And when we lose it, it causes a big issue. So we have a QA on each of our teams that runs through and sets jobs, put loads through. And initially we created a test harness to interact with this service that provides print jobs. Here it is. So over here on the left, I've got the service running. This is the Alpha Management service. You can see it's just making health check, pings, whatever. And over here is the test harness. Now, originally it was a, can I get this to go away?
Maybe if you click the X, I think it does. Oh, that just took you back.
All right. So this CLI basically was just like a wrapper around some like TCP connection, sends a print job, whatever. But look how bad this experience is. I have to do, it's Go, so it's not script, so I gotta do Go run, and then I gotta run it because I don't remember any of the commands. and then it takes forever because it has to compile, right? Okay. So I want to send an API print job. So go run API. I need to send a direct job to, let's see if this works. Okay, go run. Already, this is like a pretty terrible experience, right? I mean, CLI tools are cool, but like running command aren't really that. So there we go. We sent a print job. What I did is I put the CLI part out, CLI parsing, like parsing out of that harness, and just use the the service level and generated an MCP server with AI. It costs like $3, but like totally worth it. So our QI guy can now just go to it works. It works. The errors come from the MCP server talking to Claude through standard IO, which is like the dumbest thing ever. But they had to make it so apes could make MCP servers too. So there we go. All 13 direct print jobs have been sent successfully using the Epic connector. The batch of jobs was processed and completed without any issues. Whereas normally my QA guy would have to go in and type in, okay, I'm going to open up Postman, open up the test harness. I'm going to figure out what commands I need to write. And then I'm going to run that 13 times and then check if the jobs come through. He can just open up Claude and say, hey, done 13 jobs. Or, hey, open up a batch, right? And this might seem trivial because I'm just talking about batches or just about jobs, but now we have batches with jobs. We have L jobs, jobs. Like, and once you add a permutation or a separate feature, now like the combinatorial possibilities of like what you have to test grows so quickly. But you can test it with natural language. So for his smoke test, he's like, oh, send 13 jobs. We just changed like the custom field feature. So and 13 more jobs with that field. Back and say, oh, do the jobs have all the custom fields? You know, just an end-to-end test. So this is a useful MCP server, in my opinion. There's a lot of free ones that are kind of hit or miss. But does anybody have any questions about this, or if you want to talk more about implementation, we can, or I can show you the demo.
Sorry, go ahead. Do the other quick part.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, my mouth's full. So with the whole spiel on MCP, how do you tie that into machine learning, data science, or even like data analytics for that matter?
Yeah, it's a stretch. It's like LLMs, really. That's the only thing.
Agents.
Yeah, agents. Yeah, it's a very rudimentary agent. Right? Yeah.
So you mentioned that you shouldn't use MCP if you care about security. So can you elaborate on why that is and what you might do if you do care about security?
Not MCP.
Yeah. So like, I'm trying to like answer the question without diving too deep into MCP itself, but you seem like you want to say something about this.
I do. I want to
Go
do
for it.
all of the things. There's actually a really good article. Joe Reese posted it on his last newsletter. It's literally called, and then I posted it on my Discord where they drew the same picture that I drew. And I was like, yes, I get it. I would say if you want to use MCP and stay secure, perimeter matters, right? So if you're inside a closed perimeter, right, like completely inside of VPN or something like that, you're probably fine. But remember that this is another good article. The part of that that's hard is, remember, you will always make a call out to that LLM. So make sure that you have an enterprise license where they guarantee some kind of minimum security guarantee. And then the third thing is don't give it any kind of proprietary information or PII, because you cannot guarantee that what the model will do. It can make calls, but the data it has access to, it kind of is allowed to use in many different ways. So those are like the three things but it's MCP.
So does the issue mostly revolve around that you can't trust an LLM?
Partially, that's partially it. The other thing too, right, is there's a data access issue, right? So with the way that they have tokens set up, they only have a way to authenticate that the caller has permissions to make a call. They don't have a way to authenticate roles or say, you are allowed to access this data based on the things you're going to do with this data, right? So if you set up an MCP server right here, right, say I want to set up an MCP server for my company Slack. We know what people send on Slack, everything they shouldn't send on Slack, right? And then you build 15 different agents. Each of those agents go call up to, Anthropic's Claude. And then Claude is the middleman between those 15 agents and all of your MCP servers. So this agent, maybe only job might be to run QA tests, but now it has access to proprietary information on Slack. And it'd be like, might be something like, oh, I don't know the answer. Why don't you contact X in IT? Their email is this, their phone number is this. And by the way, this is their 4chan handle. It's like, why are you sending that on Slack? But it now has information to it. And it thought it was helpful. It's related to trying to contact
Okay,
somebody,
that makes sense.
right? So it's not that it's a great tool. It just has to have the right use case. And yeah, I get it. Data is just what I do, so that's what I think about the most. I do think role access is kind of the next missing piece they need to be able to solve.
There's that aspect. There's so many attack vectors actually to go.
I'm like so narrow.
And that's just a single one, right? Like for example, with this, if like this MCP server was connected to production and my test guy just sent out like 100,000 million jobs and then like delete them all. And then, like delete production data, that would be bad.
Yeah, they
But
also get permissions. What can the agents do?
This is just talking about building your own MCP servers. If you use somebody else's MCP, like
You're on, Chris.
okay, so let's see.
Yeah, this is pretty just self-explanatory. The deal is, how do you take this scenario and act on it, right? This is where you have a project that is using AI in any capacity, and it's working. You know it's working because you tested it. It maybe is being used by some people. I know not being used by anyone, that's kind of a hyperbole. You maybe have one or two customers using it, and it is exclusively consuming APIs. And by that, I mean consuming LLMs from LLM providers such as OpenAI and Anthropic. Right? So what do? Is that even a problem? I'll talk to you a little bit about a project that I did last year for the NBA, where this was their product. This was their pipeline. We distilled it down to these, I guess, 7 steps, which the point of this was to take real-time audio data from announcers and both translate it and also kind of put it into regular vernacular. And then at the very end of it to voice clone the original announcer so that we could have them reading in other languages live. And there are a couple of intricacies here. The first is that the broadcasts happen in 6-second chunks. So there's an issue there from an NLP standpoint where like if it cuts off mid-word, you don't know that it was cut off mid-word, and so your transcription service will screw that up. Initially, they had solved this with this sliding window where it was taking 18 seconds. And they found that 18 seconds was kind of their critical point because that's where they were getting enough context to do good transcription every time and move forward every single time. But their 18 seconds of audio was taking longer than 6 seconds to process. And so it was introducing this big old lag every single chunk that would just compound. So yeah, these are the problems. Transcription service fails because it's expecting correct grammar and correct syntax. So this is an example. When you are announcing for a sports game, you do not follow the standard American English procedure of grammar, but you do speak English in a standard syntactically correct way. Then it was untenable for live streaming. And then the last part was my favorite part. When they asked like the Japanese speaker, does this make sense? He said, I did not understand any words. That's kind of a problem, right? So, and to go back to this really quick, you'll notice right here, audio transcription service. I'm not going to call anybody out, but they were using a transcription service. They had a translation service, also by API. This one I am going to call out, the sprucing up words. That was ChatGPT. And then there was another API at the end. So let's keep going. Principles for solving. These are things that hopefully are pretty ubiquitous, like regardless of what type of project that you're working on. We don't have to hone in too deep on the NBA, but regardless of what type of project you're working on, these are things that you can do to make it better, make your AI more mature. The first one, this is my favorite one. Everything is tokens. If you are not delving into the process by which tokens are created, and for anyone who doesn't have like a really great understanding of what tokens are, those are what your model actually sees. Your model does not see language. Your model does, Your model does not see language. Your model does not see numbers. Your model does, or numbers at string. Your model does not see pictures. Your model sees tokens or intermediary representations of those things. And so figuring out how your tokens are created and then diving into how to make them more efficient or more accurate is paramount to it to bias itself. And I'll show you the process by which we did that. So for example, when you are dealing with someone like Ja Morant, really cool guy, mentioned in the NBA quite a lot. Whisper never, ever transcribed his name correctly, not one time. So we can preload bias into Whisper to get it to actually spell it right when it's coming out by preloading both audio chunks that represent that, tokens, and also a string that represents the correct spelling, which also is created into tokens. And then we can talk about speculative decoding, but that is kind of specific to this. It's improving speed of large models without any decrease in accuracy. Pretty cool. And then this last one. There were a bunch of sequential latent calls to APIs. And so when you're making all these sequential network calls with absolutely no ability to parallelize them, you just have to eat whatever latency happens there, right? You don't have to do that if you bring it into your perimeter, right? That's not, and I want to focus on the fact that like, I'm not trying to say you shouldn't use APIs. I'm trying to say you should use APIs in a meaningful and purposeful way, right? When you know that that latency is something that you are okay with eating for the results,
Awesome. If you know that that latency is causing larger problems, you need to get rid of it. So I'm just going to go over step one here because we don't really care about all of this. But basically, it's bringing everything into the perimeter. Step one. So this is the beginning of like the very first. It's literally an IPYNB. That this was just a hack for Whisper, where basically we figured out, and I realize this is super hard to read, so I'm very sorry. I'm just going to explain. We had Whisper, we're using Whisper Large V3 here, and we're using Whisper Distill Large V3 as our assistant model. This is speculative decoding. And we figured out down here, as part of the generation quarks, it takes a language. And there was a language default, like model inference code in English. We found that if we bring a language in, English in, and we pretend that it is all in English, and then we come, oh, thank you so much. We pretend that all of it is English, but we know what other languages we are trying to get. Isn't that cool? We can hack Whisper to get it to just automatically decode in the target language, and that eliminates so many of our calls just immediately, right? It's all gone. Our transcription and our translation are happening in the exact same call, and it's on-prem, so we can speed it up, which we did with the speculative decoding. This was more than 3 times faster. Like this IPYNB running on the exact same live data on a literal MacBook Pro was 3 times faster than our AWS offering with APIs built in, which was pretty cool. And there were other things, right? This was going from the hack to the prototype, right? The Python bindings for FFmpeg, because I don't know what the problem was, but it sometimes failed. But this is where we're kind of cutting the chaff out. We're going from an IPYNB to an actual runnable code base. We're doing speaker diarization too. This is one of the things that the hack didn't do, where we want to see who is speaking, not just that there is speaking happening. That was something that wasn't happening before.
The diarization is identifying who the subject.
Identifying the speaker, right? And we don't care about it identifying so much as like, oh, this is Shaquille O'Neal speaking. We care more about it just identifying speaker 0 compared to the embedding. And then we can just go from there. That allows us to keep it anonymous as well. For the case that you have like a guest speaker coming on, and I don't know who that is beforehand. So I don't have an embedding to compare them to. You know what I mean? Speculative decoding, allowing you to use a distilled version. So the main requirement for speculative decoding is that the assistant model and the big model both have to have the same architecture, the same fundamental architecture. Which in this case, Distill Whisper has the same fundamental architecture as Whisper. They have to have the same tokenizer. And here's our sequence bias with one example, right? Quilter. And then we put it through our tokenizer so that we can get what tokens actually come out from that, so that we can add that sequence bias into the generation quarks. Here is how we forced Whisper to take prompts. I don't even want to explain this. I feel like it's too deep. But just understanding that, like, if you dig into how the model works, you can get it to do almost anything, right? The idea here is that language is literally infinite, right? If we want to go back to the why are MCPs not secure question, the other half of that is you can say anything to an MCP. You can say literally anything. And if you just go to llm-attacks.org, that is like fundamental research on the beginning of red teaming LLMs with adversarial prefixes, suffixes, infixes, and circumfixes. A lot of these still work. Like the one that is literally published as the example on their website doesn't, but a lot of the principles hold true still. You can do that and take advantage of that. You can purposefully attack your own LLM to elicit particular behaviors. Names, awesome. I love that. And then it wasn't just Paul George anymore. And then yeah, the customers liked it, our demos liked it, and the native speakers liked it. So here's the version, like the working version that was actually sold as a product and had 1 or 2 customers versus the one that was able to be sold a lot easier and got more customers, where it's like hitting Wimbledon, it's hitting NHL, it's hitting other places. Anyway, I'm gonna stop there. Do we have questions about this? And keep in mind, like, I don't want to present that you should do exactly this so much as you should follow these same principles to level up your AI workflows. Go ahead.
A lot of sports have a lot of like specialty words that, you know, for example, like if you're transcribing it into Chinese and you're doing like the NFL, like I know like, you know, a lot of like the words for like first down or something like that, like aren't naturally like in Chinese and something that ChatGPT might know. Like how do you deal with like all these like really like specialized words and translate?
So that's actually one of my favorite things because it was something that they were consistently getting wrong. That's why the native speakers didn't think it made sense, because they were putting it through a ChatGPT filter. That actually made it worse than the initial translation, because the initial translation would get it right a lot of the time. The idea here though is that professional sports, they have those specialty words. They also have style guides. Every single one of them, every single organization that runs professional sports and pretty much anything that runs any professional broadcasting at all has style guides about what words do you say? What words do you not say? How do you say these words? When do you use these words? And we were able to take advantage of that for this part, audio transcription and translation. That sequential bias, I only included 1 line because that thing was like 700 lines long. Of not just words, but like grammars and references to other dictionaries that were just expanding of player names, of particular terms, of those terms in different languages. Like all of this was, it felt a little bit hard coded, but we were able to cling to it to raise our metrics because the announcers have to cling to it. Do you know what I mean? Like they are not allowed to say other things. Go ahead.
So this was a MBA project.
That's right.
Did you like actually get funding with this? Do you think?
Get funding?
Yeah.
Oh, this is not allowed to. This is their deployment.
Oh, this is a product?
Yeah.
Okay.
Anything else?
Oh, let's give
Let's go.
Yay. It is 7:37. I could give a very summarized talk that Earl will get for the 3rd time. Or we can just mingle. Any preferences?